Welcome to the Strength and Sthenics Podcast. Today, we are chatting about the Calisthenics Roadmap. So this is kind of episode 1 for the person that wants to go from lifting or running and prioritizing more calisthenics in their life. And this episode is all about, where do I start? So, Dennis, bring us in. What is a good question to ask yourself when you want to get started?
Good one. People have a big confusion, I think, when they look at the sport. There's so many things you can do. There's so many skills and people doing crazy stuff. And like, where do I find the time? How do I do this? How do I integrate this into training? Do I need to go all in? We'll give you a response to that today. The first best thing to do is actually start by asking yourself, in fact, as you said, a few questions. The number one question always is, how much time do I have available? How much time can I really invest, or am I currently investing into the sport? Depending on the response, I feel like the answer is going to be a different one, because if you can invest more time, you can work on more skills, you can do more things and dedicate more time to the calisthenics part of things. If your time is limited, you will have to choose.
I think one of the good points here is that even if your time is limited, some of the people in my audience are a little bit older, we're fathers or mothers, we have kids, have busy lives, and you have 2 1-hour sessions a week or 3 1-hour sessions a week to dedicate. You can still develop some cool stuff. You just have to think about it a little bit more critically and figure out what's important for you and what makes sense.
When you have 2 to 3 times a week, maybe around 1 hour, and you're currently using this time for pure lifting, you're doing upper and lower body. Maybe you're doing 2 full body sessions or 3 full body sessions or 2 upper body sessions and 1 lower body session. The last split, if you're interested in calisthenics, is probably the way to go. You're a bit more upper body focused and a bit less lower body focused, simply because calisthenics is a sport, if you want to learn the skills, where the lighter your legs are and the less fatigue you generate training legs, the more results you will get in the upper body. There's no way around it. And here as well, it's just about choosing the priorities, the things that are important for you.
And there's just more skills to learn with your upper body, right? Like
Exactly. Very, very true. With this limited time available, looking for super fancy, super specific skills is a bit of a waste of time, at least in the beginning. So something like the planche, which takes a lot of specific volume. Specific volume means you need to spend a lot of time doing this skill, maybe not frequency-wise, so twice a week is enough to train for the planche, but you'll have to do a lot of sets, a lot of repetition. It's a very difficult movement to learn, and you'll be doing up to 8 sets a session, or even 10, 12, like a lot of sets. And that costs a lot of time. And if you don't have much time available, you'll use this time to mostly train your front delts and bringing some stability in your shoulder blades. And that's kind of it.
There's other movements and skills that could potentially like bring more benefits to your full body, right?
Exactly. And the 2 things that come to mind if you have like this time available is for sure the muscle up. It is just this entry level skill. Entry level doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's accessible as a skill. And you need to work on the pull up to get there, which is a movement that uses your whole back section. You use your lats, you use your rhomboids to train your arms. Like, it's an awesome exercise, both for hypertrophy, strength, and simply building an aesthetic body as well. And you work mostly towards the pull-up. And the muscle up is just technical work sprinkled in at some point when you feel great. And if you do 4 sets of muscle ups a week, 4 sets, and that's if the set takes you 5 seconds to do and the rest times are 1.5 to 2 minutes, it's like 10 minutes of work a week. And you can get that. And that's more than enough. The rest of the time is done in the pull-up, the rest of the work, not the rest of the time. And by doing so, you will cover the muscle groups that you're probably already training in a very specific way.
Let's pause there for a second. For me, getting into calisthenics, there's like this misconception that anybody who's training calisthenics, maybe you're going out to a calisthenics park or you have this like setup in your backyard and you're just training planche and front lever and muscle ups and handstands all day long, right? But I've learned more and more, and especially from you being my coach, that you can actually just focus on a lot of the stuff that people are focusing on in the gym and get some of these skills, like you're saying with a muscle up, with a small percentage of your training. You want to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I like to divide the training almost in 2 to 3 sections. The first
Okay.
section would be the technical work. And the technical work is about learning the exact technique that you use to perform a skill, which goes in the direction of neuromuscular adaptations. In the beginning, at least, the intensities are very low and you focus on very little details and you focus on feeling your body, so to say. And you just work in the muscle up. It would be the timing. When do I pull? Which is honestly just swinging like a little kid. You swing in and you wait for the right moment to pull. You understand how to grip the bar correctly. You understand how to slightly depress your scapulas to pull. You understand how to keep your elbows in. So very, very technical details that teach your body to use the muscles in a certain way to reach a certain goal.
And it's good to do this at the beginning of the session when you're fresh, because to develop skills, you want to have a lot of energy, right?
Exactly. You don't want to do this at the end of the session where you're cooked, half of your muscles aren't responding, they're fatigued, and so on. So in the beginning of the session, and this will be very little work for certain skills that are easier. It depends here, as always, how much time you have available. Of course, you can do a lot of technical work and gather a good training volume of technical work as well. But that's something we'll discuss later. As a clear idea, you do some technical work to teach your body the right positions and the right way to actually activate these muscles. And then the second section is the main work. And the main work can be purely gym work as well. It doesn't mean that just because now you're doing some skills, you even need to do pull-ups. You could keep doing your lat pull downs. You adapt the technique slightly maybe to understand and really develop a feeling for what you're doing. The thing with machines very often is, but you don't need to focus on a lot. And that's a great advantage they have. You sit yourself into the position, you're kind of in there and you just push. You're not thinking about what you're actually doing with the body. You're just focusing on a certain target musculature and not how everything plays together. And having movements where everything plays together, like the pull-up, makes sense because it's a technical component to it as well, of course. Well, if you just do a lat pull-down very often and your legs are fixed, you don't think, you just bring the bar down. And it's like, I bring the bar down and it goes up again. Instead of like, where are my elbows? What am I doing with my scapulas? Am I squeezing nicely at the bottom? So just putting more focus into these movements makes sense. And of course, the more specific the movement, the greater the transfer will be as well. This is your main work. You do a few sets. They're more or less intense depending on where you are in your mesocycle. And then you switch to accessory work. And accessory work can be divided in 2 parts. One is purely for conditioning and muscle. Certain isolated muscle groups that you like to work on. For example, the side delts that might not be super specific to a skill, but are just great to work on, or some work for your rotator cuff, or just some isolated work for your biceps because it's a lacking muscle group where you can spend some volume doing that, or some assistance work that helps you further to activate for the skills that you're working on. This is way more specific stuff, a bit fancier stuff that can be done at the end because it's like, it just takes, for example, the hips in the planche, and you do some work to understand the hip positioning better, things like that.
For the person who's, we'll just call it the archetype of 3 hours a week, 3 sessions a week, muscle up, what's another good skill to get started on to accompany the muscle up?
I like the handstand push-up, and that sounds like scary and super far away. The big disadvantage of the handstand push-up is you need to learn the handstand.
And we'll talk more about handstand for sure.
Maybe a few short points, just so you know what's coming regarding the handstand. You don't need to train the handstand 5 or 7 times a week. 3 times a week is more than enough for most people. 2 times a week works for most people as well, especially if you're on your heavier side. You need to give your wrists time to get conditioned to this position.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about managing fear of being on your hands. It's a lot about learning to balance. Some people are more gifted, some people are less gifted there. Depends a lot on what you've done when you were young, or some people are naturally good at it, even though they have never done it much. Here as well, you don't need hours and hours of training. Once the fear is gone, and to get rid of the fear, it's enough to do 3 to 8 minutes 2 to 3 times a week.
That's what I was actually going to see if you agreed with this. You know, someone who's training for an hour Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if you have 15 minutes to dedicate to a little training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you could work on some handstand stuff in between. And that could be sufficient amount of work to work towards your handstand and not have to dedicate your hour training sessions to that handstand work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here, of course, I would plan it smartly, like maybe after the leg session rather than when your shoulders are tired from
Right.
the other session. Both options are great, because then at the end of the day, you have to dedicate some time plus a little warm up. On other days, you can do it in the beginning of the session, 3 to 5 minutes, and just keep it very short, twice a week. It's not very fatiguing as work. In the beginning, it is, if you don't have the right mobility. So it does go and work on your shoulders, actually.
It's kind of mentally fatiguing as well, right? Because you're like, I got to get this, and then I got to squeeze this, and then, oh, shoot, now I forgot to squeeze this, right? So
Yeah.
it's like your focus is really intense for these things.
Exactly. It doesn't cost a lot of time. It doesn't cost a lot of like bodily fatigue at the end of the day. And it makes you work towards an awesome skill. And the handstand push-up work is just you working on the shoulders. If you can't do a pike push-up yet, you pick up some dumbbells, and 1 kg dumbbells, everyone can push overhead at that point. You can start there and you work your way up there until you can work on pike push-ups, and then add range of motion. First, add reps, add range of motion, add weight, and really start getting stronger there. And you do that, you'll see results. It's not that you need to stop doing your gym stuff. You can just mix a bit more of a specific pattern here as well. You can't do a lot of pike push-ups yet. You do 2 sets of single eccentrics twice a week. You learn how to position the scapulas. Your main work are 2 sets of military press afterwards. Great. Awesome. So you work on both things at the same time. You simply split the volume in a more technical component and a strength component. And you can bring some technical cues into the strength component, keeping you healthier, hitting your muscle groups better that you want to actually work on. You'll see better results this way. And at the end, after a few months, you'll have a handstand. Your shoulders will be strong. The next step is the handstand push-up.
Yeah. And we'll do a full episode on handstand push-up. But I would add that you're like, I'm 45. I don't know if I can put that as much time into developing a full handstand push-up. Even a handstand push-up against the wall is a really cool skill to develop, you know, and you don't necessarily need to balance that thing freestanding. You're still going to get super strong. You know, you can do back to wall or chest facing the wall. It'll give you some different variation. Yeah.
So good. I did forget about that. It's the way how I used to train. So the back to wall handstand push-up was the way how I built my shoulders. Such an awesome exercise. So fun. And once you get comfortable with it, you know, it's a cool thing to do, and you can do it everywhere. You're in a hotel room on the other side of the wall. You don't care. You go, you get some nice shoulder workout in.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it? You told me you did 100 reps in one session one time.
Yeah. In the first years of training, I don't remember exactly the split, but I think if you look on YouTube for Bar Brothers full upper body routine, volume 2 or something like that, you find it. I was doing exactly that. It was like one day was like over 100 pull-ups, one day was push-ups and dips, and the third day after your chest and your front delts are actually already cooked, not very smart, you do 100 handstand push-up at least in one session. So 10 sets of 10 or something like that.
Oh my God. That's insane. It's good you did that young when you could handle that type of volume, right?
Yeah. And it's the reason why my handstand, I use that as an excuse, of course, is still a banana, because like doing all those back to wall handstand push-up, like you put yourself into this super close position. You're always arched. And that's how I learned the handstand. Like my first handstand, I never did technical work for it. And this, you shouldn't do this. Like, it's not the way. I just pushed myself up into handstands. Like I handstand push up myself. That was the way how I entered handstands. I got it the wrong way around.
That's great though, man. So I was the opposite. I learned like the very technical, probably more gymnastic style way of learning a handstand. But I see a lot of people in calisthenics learn their handstands from like that, or like, you know, pushing up from like a frog position, right? And what I will say is that it does seem to develop more shoulder strength learning it that way, right? Maybe it's not the prettiest straight lines, but there's positives and negatives to everything.
Exactly. Then it's about your priorities. I always saw the handstand as a means to an end. Like the handstand was just my way to the handstand push-up, the planche, eccentric, the 90-degree handstand push-up. I never cared about the aesthetics. Now I'm older. Now I slowly, like for a while, I lived the meme. I used to be so strong in handstand push-up. My handstand was awful to look at. And now I think like the time's come to work on stuff I never wanted to.
We need to swap a little bit. I have like a pretty good handstand line, but I need some of your strength, you know, and
let's go 50-50.
There we go. There we go. For someone who has a little bit more time to dedicate to training, let's say they're used to going to the gym 5 days a week and doing maybe up to 90 minutes, 120 minutes even. What are some other skills? How many skills is sensible? And another question is like, how do you pick the skills that you want to start working on?
Now, time isn't a problem. If you can train 4 to 5 times a week for 1.5 to 2 hours, you can, without a problem, work on multiple skills at once. Usually, the classic. So if we take the prototype Sthenics athlete, honestly, people that come into coaching, they have 4 main goals. It's the planche, it's the front lever, it's the one-arm pull-up, and it's the handstand push-up or variations of it. These 4 things.
I guess you throw in the muscle up and you just kind of have like these 5 that are very classic calisthenics movements.
Exactly.
Right?
There's fancy stuff. You can work on these skills and work on things like the front lever pull-up, the planche push-up, Hephaestus, iron cross, for example, at the same time as well. You won't be training much longer, but you will have to maintain certain things. So you can train them all, but you can't progress in them all. And that's one thing that's super important to understand when working towards multiple skills at once. A lot of people make the point, so if you just focus on 1 or 2 skills at once, you will improve more. I like to disagree with that until a certain point. Of course, if you generally are less fatigued, especially in skills that have overlapping muscle groups, you will progress a tiny bit faster in one skill. But at the end of the day, if the muscle groups aren't overlapping or they're partly overlapping and the activations are very different, you can dedicate the time to the skills if you program them smartly and you recover enough. And the human body can recover from a lot. Once you condition your body and you understand the movement and the learning process falls away and it's more about repetition, you can do quite a lot. You have people deadlifting 300 kgs and then running 2 Ironmans. So a skill more won't kill you. Regarding skill goals, having 4 and +1. So at that point, if you have this much time available, I don't see the muscle up as a skill to work towards on. I see the muscle up as a skill that just comes as a present. It's a bit of a different way to see it because in the beginning, you need to dedicate extra time to learn it. If you don't have that much time available, it makes sense to have it as this primary goal. But if you're working on all these goals at the same time, the muscle up will just be a little present that you get with just maybe 2 to 3 sets a week. Because if you're working towards the one arm pull-up, you need to get extremely strong in the pull-up. If you're extremely strong in the pull-up, you need very little work to get the muscle up.
Muscle up becomes easy. Yeah.
Exactly. These 4 skills play together super, super well. Maybe to give an example how you could divide the week, maybe if it doesn't get too confusing and too much, I'll try to bring a standard structure down. So take out your notepad and maybe put down some ideas. Training more than 4 times a week is only necessary if your sessions need to be shorter than 1.5 to 2 hours, because you split the volume up on 5 days. The mistake that people do when they train with a higher frequency is they just try to fit in more. You can only recover from so much volume, and you just spread out the volume differently on 5 days compared to 4 days. That's one point to make. It gives you the possibility to repeat a movement more often. In general, though, a frequency of twice a week is more than enough for every movement. So you have 4 times a week of training, twice a week for each and every of these skills, which makes it quite easy to divide them. So you do planche and front lever, as well as one arm pull-up work on one day, and you have this day twice a week. And then you have one day where you focus on the handstand push-up, some technical work for the muscle up if you want to. So you have your 5th skill in there, and you do some technical work for the skills from day 1 and day 5, for example. You do some assistance work for lacking muscle groups. This way, you have actually a beautiful round plan where you hit everything. The big thing in programming calisthenics, where people have a hard time and don't know where to fit it, is where is chest and front delts. The reason why calisthenics athletes have chicken breasts very often, they have very underdeveloped pecs, because once they are strong at push-ups, they switch to dips, and a lot of people dip with a very close technique, which takes mostly the front delt and not much of the chest, and they don't touch dumbbells and barbells. And I find for a balanced physique, just aesthetically, working on your chest and having this slightly arched position when you do these movements, and really working on the stretch as well, and working against this typical kyphotic position that a lot of Calis athletes have because of planche and protraction constantly, is actually not a bad idea. And usually you need to divide the pec work from the shoulder work. So on the first day, you will add maybe some pec work. If the handstand push-up is a high priority, if the handstand push-up is a low priority, add it to the first day and add the pec work to the third day. Here as well, nothing changes in the way of how you're gonna divide your session. You're gonna do your technical work. You're going to do your planches, you're going to do your front levers for quite a bit of sets and low intensities. Then you're going to switch to your pull-ups and bench press, for example, or pull-ups and dips as your main work. It can be a lat pull down, a bench press, a dumbbell bench press, a bench press machine. Then, if needed, you can do some extra specific work for the muscle groups. For example, you don't hit your horizontal lat fibers much, or they're underdeveloped, you want to work on back thickness, go for a row variation. Nice, great. For the chest, you can use a pec deck or something like that. That's very isolated. So you bring in these bodybuilding movements on your muscle groups in an isolated way. And at the end, you can add some core, being, for example, the dragon flag, another fun skill to learn, which will help you to achieve your front lever. And you have a well-rounded, beautifully built session that hits all the main muscle groups at great intensities from different angles, and has a technical skill component to it, which will improve over time.
You just got really technical there. Let's pull it back a little bit and let's talk about kind of realistic expectations for different people, right? Because everyone's going to have their own experience with getting into calisthenics, right? So what are some things to consider when you're thinking about your own fitness level, your training history, your body type?
Maybe let's start with body type. Of course, if you're on the bigger side, so you're not 170 like I am, or 160 centimeters. I don't know what that's in inches.
Probably 5'9"-ish, 5'8"-ish, something
Yeah,
like that.
probably. So if you're on the little side, you can consider lever skills for sure, because that's going to make it easier. If you have light legs in general, you can consider lever skills in the beginning as well, because you're going to see progress in them. They're going to be fun. If you progress in them and you have fun, then you stick to it.
This is like a nice little personal anecdote from myself here is like, of course, when I first discovered calisthenics, I was like, I'm going to start working on planche. So I do my tuck planche, and, I'm work up to being able to do 10 seconds, which probably not a very good 10 seconds. And I'm like, okay, of course, next I'm going to jump to advanced tuck. And it's just like, there's nothing there, right? I can't hold this thing for 1 or 2 seconds. And I think that, after being in this field for the last like 5 years or so, you start to see that lighter people, they can make these jumps between progressions a bit quicker, right? But if you're on the bigger side, if you have heavier legs, if you're taller, then it's probably not going to be that smooth of a path. And I think it's just good to know that. It doesn't mean that you can't do it, because you have plenty of examples of heavier guys, taller guys that have learned the planche, but it's probably going to be quite a journey, right? So it's just setting those expectations from the beginning.
Absolutely. The planche is one of the skills where you really need to want it, first of all. No matter how light you are and how big you are, you need to want it. And you need to know that you need to stick with it for years. And if you're not gifted, progress is not going to come easy. And that's why people get stuck. That's why people stop. That's why people often don't enjoy it, because you see some gifted athlete going through the progressions like a breeze. They just try and it works and it's easy.
Straddle planche in 3 months, right?
Exactly. Straddle planche. And then they're like, it's my secret method. No, you just are lucky. And that's that.
Yeah.
Yes, hard work and all, but you have people that are working 5 times harder, 5 times harder, or 10 times more consistent, and they don't get the results that you do. And that's not because they're not dedicated enough. It's because they're simply built different, and physics is a thing, and muscle insertions are a thing. Like, even if you maybe are on the little side, you might not be able to activate it. So how well you can fire certain muscles is a thing. There's so many factors. The typical question is, how long does it take to learn XY skill? I don't like giving an answer because I've seen everything, but there's ranges, of course. And the planche is a skill where you range between 1 and 5+ years to you might never be able to even achieve a straddle planche, which hurts and nobody wants to hear. It's not great marketing either, but it's the truth.
Which is so much different than lifting, right? Because if you, no matter your body type, like if you want to bench those 100-pound dumbbells for 8 reps, most people can achieve that, right? Like most people can achieve that in a couple of years, a few years of just like really focusing and good programming. But calisthenics skills can be much different.
That's where I feel like programming comes into play. So if your path is not a breeze, if you're not going from one variation to the other, it's important that you've tried. It's important that you dedicated time. It's important that you understand and know the pain and how long it takes to reach something before you go into something like coaching or so, that you have tried. It's a super important thing, and you see what works for you and what doesn't. You will need to take things slow. You'll need to work on some steps in between that no YouTube video will ever tell you, because the people doing those YouTube videos, they have never needed to do those. They just invent them afterwards to sell something very often, sadly. And they're not very useful.
Interesting point there, though, that because that was also my experience is, you just watch these YouTube videos. Okay, I've watched 4 YouTube videos on the planche, and like this guy's saying to use this one, this guy's saying to use this one. You're trying everything out, still nothing's working. And it's like, at that point, if there is a skill that's just yes, I really want this thing, it could be a good time to hire a coach, such as yourself.
That aside, it can still take a long time. It's not a shortcut. It's about working consistently and keeping at it. When you go and work on these skills, maybe to finish like how long something can take, front lever is quite achievable for everyone. And the time that you need to dedicate yourself to it is a bit shorter. Usually in 2 years, a lot of people can learn a front lever. That's a good time. That's a good night.
That's a great time, right?
Yeah.
That's like
yeah.
you have to be dedicated to do something for 2 years, but it's not so long that like seems far. The older you get, you're like 2 years. Yeah, that's going to come before I know it.
Exactly. In handstand push-up, the factor that changes if you learn it in 6 months or in 3 years is how good you're at balancing. Balancing is a skill, and you can only program it so much, and it's a lot genetics and how good you're at it. If you're good at balancing, if you're fast at learning a handstand, then the handstand push-up, if you have the strength, is gonna come fast. And honestly, a lot of people learn the handstand push-up in 3 to 6 months if the balance is there. It's not that crazy of a skill. The muscle up as well, a lot of fiber type distribution. If you're more on the explosive side of things, great, you're gonna learn it quite fast.
That's another cool benefit to the muscle up is you train some power and some explosiveness.
Exactly. That's super. Otherwise, you can go for the ring muscle up first. If you're rather slow twitch to a
Yes.
certain percentage, you can like shift over to one side or the other one. And even if you're slow twitch, you can learn the muscle up. It's a lot about learning the right technique and getting strong enough. So evolving enough power. One part of the equation is getting strong at the weighted pull up. And 1 year is a good time. Some people here struggle with technique as well. Can be 2, can be even 3 years. Usually it's shorter, way shorter.
And one arm pull up?
One arm pull up is a hard one. Funnily enough, I lived in my own bubble about this skill, and I had no idea what it takes to learn it because I was super gifted in it. And that's like the view of the gifted athlete. It's a movement I could do very quickly, very easily, without problems, up to 8 reps per arm before I touched a single weighted pull-up, which is absurd. And I thought, like, I went into the world, I met some super high level skill athletes like Daniel Leizens, and I was like, yeah, how many one arm pull-ups can you do? And he's like 2. And I was like, what? But you do all this crazy stuff. It doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
And that was the moment where I recognized that it's actually a very hard skill to achieve. It takes time because I like to be extra careful in teaching it. I'm sure you could force it more, but there's a lot of people that come from the movement scene, the Ido Portal movement, and a very specific way to train it, that are hurt, that are in pain, and you hear that all the time. My approach is a very get strong and do some minimal technical work. Just as mentioned before, just the real extreme about it. So you do very, very little work on the one arm pull-up itself to reach it. And here we're talking 2+ years for sure.
+ years. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, you hear me, I'm like, how long for one arm pull up? You know, because that's what I'm working on right now. And it's like, I feel like it's been a goal for a long time, and it's always felt really far off. You know, even after a year of training, I'm like, I'll probably get that in another 2 or 3 years.
You've been working for it for how long now?
With you for 6 months, right? 6 months straight.
Yeah, that. But before?
Before, well, you know, kind of off and on, right?
Okay.
So I've given it about like a year of like doing, back in 2023, a year of doing weighted pull-ups, and then like some mixed grip chin, and then going to like pulley assisted. And yeah, just didn't really feel like I got that close to it, to be honest. So
now you're very close to it.
Yeah.
Now you're tasting it slowly.
It's a beast of a movement, and interesting to hear your experience to come from the opposite end of that, but cool that you recognize that, like, oh wow, I had this completely skewed view of this movement, right?
I remember the first people I used to coach for free the first years, just like gathering experience. I was like, why is this so hard? I, I don't
Yeah.
understand.
You're like, just do it. What? Just pull yourself up. If you're like a taller, bigger dude like myself, to make it about me for a moment, what do you think the best skills to kind of like put all your eggs into, if you will?
So everything that is not a lever skill, especially if you have very developed legs. If skills are really not your thing, I like the combination of street lifting with a handstand push up and a muscle up. And then you can have like a fun little skill. So one thing we didn't talk about is the back lever is
Yeah.
one skill that is a lever and everyone can learn. Personally, I'm not a friend of the back lever simply because it's very particular, very specific to itself. Like it doesn't do much besides looking kind of cool.
You mean like there's just not much carryover, transferability to
Exactly.
that strength?
Exactly. If you don't know what you're doing and you're doing it on rings or you're doing it with a supinated grip, so your hands looking towards you, the risk of injuring your bicep is super, super high. A lot of people see it as a beginner skill and they just try it and just go in and they lower themselves into the fall from an eccentric. And so often things happen there. If you know it, of course, you use a pronated grip, you go through all the propedeutics and all the steps and you go easy at it. Here as well, if you have a good base, you get it as a present. And I feel like the human flag is another skill that falls into that category.
That's what I'm having fun with right now.
Exactly. When we met a few weeks ago, we recorded a few videos and I was like, yeah, the human flag is something you kind of learn on the side. And Josh goes, oh, yes, let's go.
Let's do it. Yeah, well, of course, like the typical experience for a lot of people in calisthenics is I've tried to like kick up into it on like a straight bar, like a pole. And of course, I'm just like, that's impossible. Like, no, there's no way with my 6'2" frame that I could ever hold that, right? But of course, there's steps to go through to like get yourself there, right? And I always get this bop on the head, with front lever, with handstand push-up. Yeah, the first time that if you just try to go into the full movement, it's going to feel impossible, but there's steps to get there, right? So
Exactly.
human flag is definitely one of those. And now I'm feeling like, oh yeah, this is super possible. This will be here in a month or so.
Yeah, which like on the side, a few sets a week. First of all, you need to know what you're doing and you need to be careful because it's becoming a lot of movements. You need to recover from them and you need to take that all into consideration. But these two things are cool things you can learn, and the handstand push-up and the muscle up. So you can go handstand push-up, muscle up, pull up, dip, squat, for example. You can be a street lifter that can do a handstand push-up as well. I think that's a very cool combination. And if you become like a strong street lifter and your pull-up is strong, you can take the one-arm pull-up in there as well.
Just to clear up street lifting for people.
What does
that exactly mean?
The second direction of calisthenics, where you don't learn skills and you don't have skills competition, is street lifting. It's a bad copy of powerlifting at the end of the day. And you you have 4 lifts instead of 3. You have the muscle up and you try to move the maximum amount of weight for 1 rep. You have the pull up where you do the same, the dip, as well as the squat. The first street lifting competitions, they had weighted pistol squats in there because squatting with a barbell, that was not calisthenics. And after a few broken patellas and problems with tendons, they were like, no, we're just gonna back squat. I was there for the first competitions. I remember Misha pistol squatting with a kettlebell of like 50 kgs. So you had like an extra weight or a dumbbell. I don't remember. There was an extra thing to hold them to actually be able to pistol squat. And he hurt his knee, and I think he's still struggling with it after, I don't know.
I've done some weighted pistols in the past, and it's hard to hold something because you don't have this counterbalance of your arm to reach out as well, right? That's why putting on a vest, I think, is easier because you can still reach your arms out and kind of have a counterbalance. But
if it's not too heavy, it actually makes it easier. So like an 8 kg kettlebell, like slightly forward, helps you. Yeah. But if it becomes more and you can't hold it out, it becomes
and you have to rack it on yourself. It's like, whew,
yeah.
Anyways, that's a little off topic, but
Yeah.
I think street lifting does make a lot of sense for a taller person, a bigger person, and to be able to handstand push up, which I will say about the handstand push up, if you have long arms, you got to lean more forward, and it can become a little bit more challenging. You know, you see shorter guys with shorter arms, and it's like, oh wow, like their head's barely moving, like they're just busting out all these reps, but still completely achievable.
That's how I would go about it. And I think the big point here, I know we started talking about all these skills and all these directions and things you can do. You can integrate a few things and still do your lifting. Do it well. Make sure you slowly progress over time. And this means not every week, even just every month. And you do your training as you're used to. Maybe you find so much enjoyment working on these other technical skills that it will take up more of your training. That's up to you. That's your choice. It's not a waste of time because I feel it gives you a bigger purpose in training, especially if you've been training for quite a while. It just brings in something fresh.
For sure. And that's one of the big reasons to choose goals that are skills rather than just doing pull-ups and dips is it can give you some motivation to, you know, you're chipping away at something that's going to take a year. It's going to take 2 years. And that's really good for the brain. I think it's good to delay gratification, and it feels really satisfying when you eventually get it, right?
Absolutely. Then you'll want the next thing.
Yeah. Then you just want to keep going. Yeah. Just for a different archetype of person, let's say you're more of an endurance athlete. You're used to running 5 miles a day, 5 days a week, or, you know, you're doing some cycling, but you're getting a little bit more into like, I really like this idea of calisthenics, being able to do some strength training outside and stuff. For this archetype of person that hasn't done a lot of lifting in the past, you do really want to put a good amount of focus into bringing up your capacity of basic skills like pull-ups, like push-ups, like dips, like Dennis even mentioned, back to wall handstand push-up, a great one, strengthening your core. All of that base is then going to allow you to get to these skills. I don't want to say faster, but like just to have an easier time getting the skills. And it doesn't mean that you can't start with skills, because I think, Dennis, you've said that on the last podcast. You can always start training a skill from the beginning, but put some time into building the strength too.
I like to bring the example when you're doing a plank where you change your shoulder blade position into a protraction with a depression, slightly lean forward and do some switches to learn and understand what your scapulars are doing, you're already working on the planche. And that can take 2 to 3 sets, a total of 4 minutes in the beginning of your session. You are working on the planche. Of course, until you aren't strong enough in your shoulders to lean more forward, just this little amount of lean, this super specific work is gonna bring some risks. If you put all your eggs in the basket and say, oh, I'm gonna just learn the planche and I'm gonna leave all the basics out. That's what a lot of young people are doing. If you can recover from it, it's great, but it's very specific. It's a super specific angle. It's an isometric. It's gonna build your muscle on a certain degree. The thing is that certain structures, passive structures, they need time to adapt. So taking it a long time isn't a bad thing. And if you try to rush it, it's those little stabilizing structures, or it's going to be the bicep tendon that are going to get inflamed because they can't take the volume that maybe your front delt actually is able to take. So the technical work, and work on the front delt that can take more with other exercises as well that don't stress these other stabilizing or passive structures.
And, you know, it's a point that's made by a lot of calisthenics people, but like soft tissue takes longer time to adapt than muscles do. So that's why you want to be really careful with these things. And I've learned the hard way in the beginning that everything's not going to come super fast, even though you want it to, right? Even though you want to jump progressions really quickly. But now being a little bit older, you appreciate the journey.
It's a good thing that it takes time at the end of the day. Everyone looks for the shortcuts, for the fastest way, for all the secrets to get there fast. But the truth is that these skills are things that need to take time. They come from the gymnastics world, where you condition for 15 years before you actually do them. And we try to achieve them in 1 to 5 years. A lot of people in 6 months, and they think that's a great achievement to learn it in 6 months. Yeah, it's cool. It's awesome. It's beautiful to see progress like that. But very often, the same people do pay the price for that.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Going back to my human flag example, if you were like, Josh, you could do a human flag and I just kicked up and did it, that would be way less meaningful than having to take a few months to actually get there. And then you're
Exactly.
like, okay, now we worked for something and we achieved it. We've talked a lot about combining calisthenics with your typical lifting, more bodybuilding style stuff. But what about people who are training with kettlebells, or they just want to use resistance bands, or, other forms of strength training? Can you combine calisthenics with those as well?
Can combine everything with everything, I guess. The things that are important to know is your body, first of all, it really doesn't care where the resistance comes from. If it's your own body weight, if it's a resistance band, if it's a kettlebell, a dumbbell, or a machine, doesn't care. Like, force is force. Yes, a resistance band or a machine will have a different force curve. So it might be harder in a certain part and might be easier in another one. Every movement has. And these are details that you can look at once you're deeper in your training journey, and that makes sense. And they don't even seem to make that huge of a difference in many cases anyway. That said, like, closing the parenthesis, with maybe kettlebell or super intense HIIT workouts, that's maybe one point to make. Interference effect is something that has been talked about a lot in the last 10 years. And in the beginning, it sounded like you couldn't do any cardio and it would break all your progress and you couldn't be lifting if you just went for a run. That's not true. HIIT training, though, especially if you're not used to it, does take a lot from you. So maybe if you're doing like super intense short kettlebell workouts, do your skill training before for sure, and make sure to have enough rest afterwards. Or maybe don't go all the way out, or choose certain periods of time where you prioritize one or the other if you really enjoy these types of workout, because they're fatiguing mentally and you'll feel it. They're gonna cook you. Same for if you're doing cycling, VO2 max intervals, if you're doing interval training and sprinting, things like that. Of course, if you're used to it, it's gonna fatigue you less and you can recover better. That's the only thing you need to be looking out for. Recovery, sleep enough, eat enough, and know your body enough that if you push too much, you're gonna struggle with the rest.
Sometimes I see with people who like to do HIIT workouts that they're doing it for like physique reasons. They think that they're going to get more shredded from doing like high intensity interval training, when probably a better way to go about it is just to focus purely on strength training, get stronger, get some muscle hypertrophy, and then do some, I guess, maybe zone 2 exercise, or even just keeping your activity level up, going for a lot of walks and stuff. That a lot of the time results in better physique gains than like crushing yourself with these high intensity workouts. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Probably we could go into an hour discussing this, but yeah, I'll leave it at I absolutely agree. The thing with these HIIT workouts is they make you feel great. Like they make you sweat and you feel like, oh, I've done something. That's awesome. I understand that. Skills training is not as exciting as it seems on Instagram. You go to the park and you try some stuff and you get better just by trying. And every time you do cooler stuff. If you're super gifted, yes, great, nice. But the reality is repetition, repetition, repetition. And strength training is very repetitive there as well. You know, you're very methodical about it. You do it, you rest, you do it, you rest. And it doesn't even, you don't sweat. It doesn't even feel like, you don't even feel a pump or anything. That's why it's great to divide the workout in a few parts where you actually do get that as well. But yeah, invest in muscle mass, invest in some aerobic fitness, and you have the best of both worlds. Mixing them is not that great of an idea.
Just get strong, move a lot, keep your activity level up, and like you'll Yeah, you'll be in really, really good shape. Anything else you want to add to this episode? I think we've touched on a lot for this first one of where to start.
We did touch a lot. Maybe we even got lost there at some point, but I'm very, very happy with it, actually. I think
Yeah.
we really covered a lot. Probably some questions will come up with an episode this big, and we've talked about a lot of things, but we're gonna talk more in detail about certain topics that we just shortly touched today.
Let's wrap up with something a little fun. What is your most exciting thing that you're training right now? What's giving you that spark, you know?
I think currently it's the one arm pull up again. The skill that I had and was never a problem for me, and I ignored it as a skill. I started doing it weighted and like absurd stuff, where at a certain point I was like, I don't care about this anymore. You know, I've kind of done everything I needed to with this skill. And last year, I've had an accident and quite a bad injury where I damaged or impinged a nerve, and I lost control over my right latissimus dorsi. In January, I partially, so over a year ago, my pec, and both injuries, so first the pec one and then later the lat, didn't allow me to do one arm pull-ups, because if you hang, you need to, like, your pec gets stretched.
Two things pretty heavily involved there.
For the first time, I almost couldn't do a normal pull-up, and thinking of doing a one-arm pull-up ever again was like, I might never be able to do this. And now I can do doubles again on both sides, and that makes me super happy. It's like, you know, I beat myself again. That feels great.
Congrats, man. That's got to feel so satisfying. Like, because I think when something's easy for you, you take it for granted, and then you lose it and you're like, man, why was I taking that thing for granted? That's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. So I'm sure it feels so good to get that back.
Dramatic story there. Well, for sure, the one arm pull up currently. Dieting as well. Enjoying that. Psychopath, I guess. We're in the same boat. That's the nice thing about calisthenics as well. You get lighter and everything gets easier. It takes away, you know, if you're just focused on your physique, you look at yourself in the mirror while you're dieting. In the beginning, it's nice and awesome. And then you just see yourself as this flat, deflated, yes,
Skinny
lean,
boy.
but especially in the morning, you get body dysmorphia. And if it's about the skills, you're like, oh, I'm gonna fly today.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. I feel better, lighter usually. I don't know. Some people are the opposite. Like, I know a lot of guys that feel better when they're a bit more full and stuff, but I like to be light. I like to be able to move quicker and feel more powerful. That's why I enjoy it as well.
Same. Been out of the comfort zone for a lot of years now. What's your skill that you're currently loving the most?
A front lever, probably. I think it just, like, I feel the closest in my life to ticking that off, to getting the full front lever. So just very motivating each session coming in. And we've been in a really good groove lately of just feels like each session just feels stronger and stronger. I'm like, whew, when is the strength going to stop, man? Keep going.
Ride the wave.
Ride the wave. Yeah.
What's gonna come after the front lever? Just asking for a friend.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm also excited to achieve that skill because we pre-recorded a little chat about the front lever. So it's going to be a fun video to make for Strength Side, you know, in a couple months or so. So
Nope.
It'll bring some good stuff. Yeah, no pressure, right? It's like where, you know, 6 months from now, hey Josh, where's that front lever video? What's going on? Cool. Well, we'll wrap up there.
We'll wrap up there. Well, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed, and see you the next time.
See you guys soon.